This lecture presents current theories of human error in organizations. Information systems rely on human operators, and human operators are bound to make mistakes. So understanding the root causes of human error is critical for improving system reliability. And this lecture looks at some of the most recent theories of human error in organizations. All right, well, industry data suggests that human error is the main source of reduced dependability of systems today. Software is improving, hardware is improving. These are becoming increasingly reliable over time. So system management, which relies on human operation, has become the major contributor to system unreliability. Most recent estimates are that over 50% of system crashes are attributed to the human operation, to the human operator. Human error is also seen as the only contributor to system failures that does not seem to be improving over time. Hence, there has been an increased interest in the causes and explanation of human error. Within the safety literature, there are two general approaches to studying human error: the person approach and the system approach. The person approach is the traditional approach. It views unsafe acts as arising primarily from aberrant mental processes such as forgetfulness, inattention, poor motivation, carelessness, negligence, and recklessness. The extreme view of this approach sees people as agents of free will capable of choosing between safe and unsafe behavior. If something goes wrong, it must be the person's fault, so we blame the person. The person or group must be responsible for the errors or problems that occur. This has been tightly coupled with what's called the just world hypothesis. In psychology, this refers to the tendency for some people to want to hold others responsible for negative events. If bad things happen, it must be the person's fault. So bad things happen to bad people. Not too hard to see why the blame the person perspective is common. We can all readily think of situations where we've seen people do incredibly stupid or idiotic things, as these examples show. Okay, the interventions from the person perspective. Okay, how do you intervene to reduce errors? Okay, well, associated countermeasures from the person approach are directed mainly at reducing unwanted variability in human behavior. Right, so these methods would include poster campaigns that appeal to people's fear, writing another procedure, or adding to existing ones, disciplinary measures, threats of litigation, retraining, blaming, shaming people. Followers of these approaches tend to treat errors almost as moral issues. Again, sort of assuming that bad things are going to happen to bad people, and blame the victim or the just world hypothesis. By contrast, the system approach adopts the basic premise that errors are expected to occur because humans are fallible. Okay, even in the best organizations, errors will occur. So errors are seen as consequences rather than causes, having their origins not so much in the shortcomings of human nature as in the upstream systemic factors that exist in organizations. These upstream factors include recurrent error traps in the workplace and organizational policies and procedures and processes that may give rise to these so-called error traps. Interventions in the systems approach are based on the assumption that although we cannot change the human condition, we can change the conditions under which humans work. Central idea is that of system defenses. All hazardous technologies possess barriers and safeguards. When an adverse event occurs, the important issue is not who blundered, but how and why the defenses failed. As I said, the person approach tends to be the dominant one. So it's useful to analyze it more closely and identify the problems that exist if you adopt a purely person approach to error management. I should say here that much of this work I'm presenting here, or the summary of this critique of the person approach, draws on the work of James Reason. He's a psychologist at the University of Manchester in England. He's sort of a preeminent safety researcher. As I said, the person approach is a dominant approach in most workplaces. I guess you could argue that it has much to commend to it. As I said earlier, we can all think of cases in which, excuse me, people do pretty stupid things. But from the organization's perspective, blaming individuals is emotionally more satisfying than targeting the organization. People are viewed as free agents, capable of choosing between safe and unsafe modes of behavior. So if something goes wrong, a person or group must have been responsible, and even for legal concerns, it's nice to uncouple the person's unsafe act from the organization from which it occurs. And so there's I guess what point I'm trying to make here is it's not hard to understand why organizations adopt the person approach. Okay, nonetheless, the person approach has serious shortcomings. First, although some unsafe acts clearly are due to willful negligence or recklessness, the vast majority of them are not. In fact, a landmark study done by Mark in 1997, a study of aviation maintenance problems, revealed that 90% of all maintenance lapses were judged blameless. In other words, they were not a fault of a worker, okay, but were a fault of policies, procedures, or some other organizational factor. So 90% of them, of lapses, could not be attributed to a person. Focusing on people as the sole origins of errors also isolates the unsafe act excuse me, from the system context. Okay, as a result, two important features of human error tend to be overlooked. First, it is sometimes the best people who make the worst mistakes. Okay, so error is not the monopoly of the unfortunate few or the ineffective of workers. Your best performers as well as your poor performers can make mistakes. Second, far from being random, mistakes tend to fall into recurrent patterns. The same set of circumstances can provoke similar errors regardless of the people involved. So the pursuit of greater safety is seriously impeded by an approach that does not seek out and remove the error-provoking properties within the system at large. Okay. This brings up some work that dates to the mid-1900s, or maybe useful to bring that in here to reinforce the point that I was just made, that errors are prevalent, and that good and poor workers can make them. Heinrich did this work in the mid-1900s, again looking at sort of observational studies in organizations. And he sort of developed this triangle or pyramid. See different versions of it. First of all, don't take these numbers as truth. They're more illustrative or examples of the more general point that Heinrich made, and that is that major incidents do occur, okay, but they're relatively rare given the potential for accidents or adverse events in organizations. So Heinrich documented that for every major event, there are thousands of bad practices going on. Thousands of bad practices turn into plenty of near misses, which then yield fewer minor incidences and then the rare major incidents. So Heinrich was asking organizations to step back from focusing on just major incidents and start looking down at the bottom of this triangle, is that why are there thousands of bad practices? Again, many bad practices to fewer near misses, to fewer minor incidents, to a just a single or a handful of major incidents. Okay. All right. So given that an effective risk management depends on a detailed analysis of the mishaps, the adverse incidents or accidents, and near misses. Okay. Again, go back to Heinrich's triangle. Why are there so many near misses? Why are there so many potential problems occurring? More recently, sort of systematic analyses have been devised to try to provide organizations with a way of uncovering where the recurrent error traps are, what is leading to all these near misses, which eventually turn into minor and major incidents. Some of you may be familiar with fishbone analyses that have been done. They're sort of looking for root causes of problems or accidents in organizations. Excuse me. Here's a generic fishbone analysis where you look at defining a problem, an accident or adverse event as the effect. What are the causes of that effect? And rather than looking at single causes, the fishbone analysis forces organizations to look at categories of causes. And 6 common categories are the people, processes, equipment, materials, environment, and management. Okay, so try when analyzing any problem, say, okay, what are the potential causes? How did people contribute? How did processes contribute? How did equipment contribute? Materials, environment, management, etc. And within each of these categories, there may be primary causes or secondary causes. So this is just sort of a generic template. Here's a specific example for hospital trying to get at the root cause of a maternal death, a mother dying during childbirth. Excuse me. Again, you have people, individual staff. What were the potential causes from people, sources from people? In this case, nurses were distracted during the delivery, and there's also nurse fatigue. Okay, well, there are team factors at play as well. Poor communication between the doctors and the nursing staff. There was also task factors involved. There was no protocol for retrieval and administration of the epidural medications during the delivery. There were patient characteristics. There was a young patient, who was pregnant for the first time. That could have been a potential cause. The work environment. There's lack of clear limits on the number of hours the staff may work, which could have contributed to the fatigue. There was non-functioning medication barcoding system, so there was some equipment malfunctioning. There's organizational management factors. There was sort of a tacit tolerance by management for delay placement of patient ID bands, and sort of a casual attitude about the use of epidurals. So all these things are seen as potentially leading to the maternal death, as opposed to focusing on just the role of the nurses, for example. So fishbone diagram or analysis represents a sort of a systematic approach to trying to understand problems or adverse events in organizations. Much more comprehensive than isolating people. Another model of accidents or errors in organizations is what's called the Swiss cheese model. And draws on some of the same principles we've been talking about, but also adds other layers of complexity. This is a model also proposed by James Reason, the psychologist from the University of Manchester. It's gaining popularity. It's been quite popular in the organizational literature. What Reason argues is that high technology systems have many defensive layers. Okay, some of these are engineered technology. They could be alarms, physical barriers. Nuclear power plants, for example, have automatic shutdowns. That would be an engineered or technological defense. Other defenses rely on people. Okay, operators, for example. Others rely or depend on organizational procedures and administrative controls. Okay, so different layers of defense in an organization. Okay, technology, administrative controls, policy, people, for example. The function of these defenses is to protect assets from hazards. Okay, and they're mostly effective at this, but there are also weaknesses. In an ideal world, each of these layers of defense would be intact. In reality, Reasons argues, they are more like slices of Swiss cheese, and they have several holes in them. Although, unlike in real Swiss cheese, these holes are continually opening and shutting and shifting in location. Okay, so maybe a little weakness pop up here, it gets fixed, and then another weakness pop up someplace else in that same layer. The presence of holes in any one slice, Reasons argues, does not normally cause a bad outcome. Okay, there may be a weakness here, but the next layer would stop it. The Swiss cheese model is almost like an accidental model of accidents, if you will. Okay, which says bad outcomes happen only when the holes in the many layers momentarily align themselves or line up to permit a trajectory a trajectory of accident opportunity that goes through a hole in each layer as drawn here. Okay, so these shifting layers, and it's only very occasionally that things line up so that there is this accidental trajectory going through all layers of defense. Again, so go back to Heinrich's triangle pyramid. This could be when the holes line up. This is when you get the one major event. Okay. All right, so the holes in the defenses arise for two reasons: active failures and latent conditions. Okay. Excuse me. Active failures are the unsafe acts committed by people. They take a variety of forms. They slips, lapses, mistakes. Okay, so active failures have a direct and usually short-lived effect on the integrity of defenses. Take the Chernobyl nuclear power accident, for example. Nuclear power plant accident. At Chernobyl, the operators violated plant procedures and switched off successive safety systems, thus creating the immediate trigger for the catastrophic explosion in the core. Okay, so that was a direct, but short-lived effect, and unfortunately it was catastrophic in that case. Followers of the person perspective would look no further than this for the causes of the adverse effect once they identify the proximal unsafe act. But as mentioned before, there are usually more systemic organizational factors that are at play as well, which was the case in Chernobyl in terms of unclear policies that existed. Okay, but the second source of holes in defenses is what are called latent conditions. Okay, these are, to quote Reasons, these are inevitable resident pathogens within a system. They arise from decisions made by management or system designers. These decisions may be mistakes, but often they are not. Okay, they may actually be sound decisions. But latent conditions can have two kinds of adverse effect. They can create error-provoking conditions within the workplace. For example, time pressure, understaffing, inadequate equipment, fatigue, inexperience. Okay, so these are latent conditions, decisions that management or system designers have made that create these conditions, which then create errors or active failures in operators and employees. Okay. Latent conditions, second source or second kind of adverse effect that is created by latent conditions are long-lasting weaknesses. Okay? These can be things like untrustworthy alarms, indicators, unsuitable procedures, design deficiencies, construction deficiencies. Okay, so these latent conditions, whether they're these sort of conditions, dysfunctional conditions, okay, or deficiencies, either source, They may lie dormant within a system for many years before they combine with active failures and local triggers to create an accident opportunity. But latent conditions can be identified and remedied before an adverse event occurs or before additional adverse events occur. Again, in the fishbone analysis, this is sort of what you're looking for, excuse me. What are the latent conditions that are creating the dysfunctional conditions or that have created long-lasting deficiencies or weaknesses? If you understand these latent conditions, that's going to lead to more proactive rather than reactive risk management. Reasons has a nice analogy here that I like to use. He likens active failures to mosquitoes. Okay, they can be swatted one by one, but they keep coming. The best remedy would be to create more effective defenses. In this case, it would be to drain the swamps in which the mosquitoes breed. The swamps, in this case, are the ever-present latent conditions. Okay, so the mosquitoes are there, the active failures are there because of the underlying conditions. The mosquitoes are there because of the swamps. Take care of the underlying condition, the swamp, the active failure, the mosquitoes goes away. Okay, so I've been emphasizing the importance of looking at the structural, latent conditions that give rise to errors. Okay, but I don't want to totally dismiss or overlook the role of the human operator. It's worth taking a second to look at the differentiating the types of errors that human operators or employees may make. Okay, so let's understand active failure a little bit better. We can differentiate three types of errors that workers make: mistakes, lapses, and slips. Mistakes occur when the execution plan, the procedures or methods that a worker is using is not suitable for the task or for achieving the desired goals. Lapses are inadvertent omissions of a step or planned action. Okay, so for example, you forgot to step on a checklist here, or you forget to reset values. Okay, so these are momentary, inadvertent omissions of important steps or planned actions. Okay, if they're not planned, they're not intentional, they're inadvertent. Slips are incorrect executions of a planned action, like miskeyed stroke, or miskeyed command. Okay, so again, sort of not intentional. So slips, lapses, and mistakes. Important distinction between slips and mistakes. In a slip, the worker's intention is correct, but a failure occurs when carrying out the required activities. Okay, so slips are, think of slips as skill-based error. It's sort of misapplied competence. Okay, the experienced skier who catches an edge and falls, his or her intention was correct, but there's a little slip up in the execution. In a mistake, the intention is incorrect. This leads to an incorrect action sequence. Okay, so mistakes are usually, it can be thought of as being either rule-based, which occurs when you're applying the wrong rules and is due to failure of expertise, or knowledge-based, which is sort of a lack of expertise. Okay, so applying the expertise incorrectly, or you lack the expertise to begin with. Excuse me. It's also useful to think about the types of cognitive task processing that goes on. Like when doing a task, what are the different cognitive processes that workers may be involved in, and these may then be linked to the different types of errors. Three levels of cognitive task processing are skill-based, rule-based, and knowledge-based. Skill-based are familiar automatic procedural tasks. Again, the skiing example is a good one. The experienced skier just gets off the chairlift and goes down, doesn't think about what he or she is doing. It's very familiar, it's automatic, and it's procedural knowledge is being employed. For rule-based task processing, tasks are approached by applying an internal set of problem-solving rules. Sort of like pattern matching. If X occurs, then do Y. Knowledge-based processing is tasks are approached by reasoning and logic. Rules and direct experience are not as important, okay, but you're using knowledge and reason and logic to figure out the task. So these are three general levels of task processing. We can match them or align them with the different types of errors. And you can see that slips and lapses occur primarily for skill-based task processing. Okay, they occur usually because of inattention or misplaced attention. You weren't paying attention correctly, or you were attending to the wrong thing, and so there's a slip or a lapse. You left something out, or you executed incorrectly. The mistakes are more likely to occur not for skill-based, but for rule-based and knowledge-based cognitive task processing. So the wrong or inappropriate rule is picked due to inaccurate portrayal of the situation. For example, for a rule-based mistake. For knowledge-based mistake, it would be the incomplete or inaccurate understanding of the system, okay, or confirmation bias or overconfidence. So the point is, mistakes are going to be associated with rule-based and knowledge-based task processing, while slips and lapses are associated with skill-based. The importance here, why taking the time to map errors onto task processing. It's important to think about, again, trying to solve or fix errors that keep occurring. If, going back to Heinrich's triangle again, if the thousands of potential problems that are occurring, if most of those are slips or lapses, okay, then the environment has to be re-engineered to draw workers' attention, or get them to apply attention correctly. If those many thousands of potential problems are more due to mistakes, misapplications of rules or knowledge, then the source or the training or intervention implication is training. Okay, we have to train workers to know the right rules and to gain the right knowledge. So there's training implications. So it's important to know whether errors are coming from slips and lapses or mistakes. Okay, so let's put this all together. Excuse me. What about how can we build towards effective error management? Well, hopefully you caught on that the person approach is not adequate in and of itself, but instead you need a systematic, multifaceted approach, okay, considering all the different possible sources of errors as well as the systemic latent conditions that exist within organizations. James Reason has, in his studies of high reliability organizations, says that the distinguishing feature of them is their collective preoccupation with the possibility of failure. Okay, whereas most organizations want to sort of isolate and deal quickly with and get rid of any failures or errors, Reason argues or points out that the high reliability organizations, those that make very few errors, are actually preoccupied with the possibility of failure. They expect errors to occur. They have a proactive approach to risk management. Okay? They train their workers to recognize errors and to recover from them. This is done by rehearsing familiar scenarios of failure and trying to imagine novel ones. So instead of instead of isolating failures, they tend to take them and apply them to different situations to generalize them. Okay, and they look to make the system reforms rather than local repairs, and by that I mean they look for a systemic overhaul of the system. Do the root cause analysis. What are the latent conditions responsible for errors, rather than trying to look for a local or a localized fix, like attributing it to a particular team or particular person or particular situation. Okay, so a much different approach. All right, so again, to go back to why we're looking at human error, more and more the causes of system failure come down to human operation. We need to understand why that occurs. The effective models are the sort of the Swiss cheese model, which argues that there are many lines of defense in an organization. It's unreasonable to think that any of them is impenetrable. Okay, but there will be holes in them and weaknesses. You know, having multiple lines of defenses means that you're probably likely to catch and prevent major errors from weakness in one, and that what you got to be aware of and try to avoid is when the weaknesses of the defenses, the holes in the Swiss cheese, align so that you have this accident trajectory going through there. Okay, but this sort of proactive approach is designed to try to patch the holes, prevent them from aligning. Okay. All right, so that's sort of an overview of sort of modern theories of human error. Any questions? Just post them on the discussion board. Thanks. Have a good day.